Hello all. After my recent first video, I have realized that there is an urgent need to make our rich Catholic doctrine more accessible. In my video, I closed with the conclusion that reading of the scripture is not enough, but that it is vital to also know our doctrine. You may ask, why do we need doctrine when we have the scriptures? The answer is very simple. Even in our court system, evidence needs authentication. A book cannot authenticate itself. Even if it claims to be true or complete, how can we be sure, since if it is in fact false, that very statement would be part of the falsehood? Also, we must keep in mind that words are always open to interpretation, and the only sure way of knowing what an author means is to ask the author himself or those to whom he has entrusted his thoughts. Now, when we are reading scriptures, obviously personal insight and inspiration is important. And this we glean by meditating upon the scriptures. But we must always keep in mind, I think, that personal insights and inspiration are influenced by our upbringing, our personal circumstances, our personal philosophy and beliefs, our ego, our fears, and even our mood at the time of reading. Personal insights are very useful for development and spiritual growth, but cannot claim with any certainty to be what the author actually intended. Case in point. Some time ago, 2 Jehovah's Witnesses came to my home, and as usual, I invited them in for some tea and a chat. And the conversation came around to the crucifixion of Jesus. And we read from Luke chapter 23, verse 43, which reads, "I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise," indicating that Jesus is promising the good thief that after his death, he would join Jesus in heaven that very night. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses do not believe in a particular judgment after death, but only in a final rapture. So when I put forward this text as a proof of a particular judgment after death, they objected to and said that my punctuation was all wrong and that it should actually read, "I tell you today, you will be with me in paradise," indicating to them that Jesus is saying, "I am telling you today that you will be with me in paradise at some time in the future, in the final rapture." So here we were in a deadlock, separated by the position of a comma. Now, how can we resolve this? Of course, all scripture should be read in the light of the entire scripture. But even this seldom resolves such issues, since every denomination can interpret scriptures to suit its own theology. Jesus himself has left us no writings. Instead, he passed on his teachings through his actions and by his spoken word to his disciples. The first writings of the New Testament of St. Paul and St. Mark were written after Jesus' death, and in fact St. Paul never actually met Jesus. What he learned about Jesus, he got by word of mouth from the apostles. This oral tradition of passing on teachings by word of mouth continued alongside the growing number of written documents through the centuries. And the two ways of passing on the teachings have always been complementary. As Catholics, we hold that this living tradition has continued uninterrupted from the time of the apostles to today through the Church. Hence, in any dispute, we can always reflect on what has been passed down to us via both sources. Also, we must remember that Jesus himself has guaranteed that he would protect his church from error, and he continues to live and guide his church. In Matthew 16, verse 8, when Jesus institutes his church and puts Peter as its head, he continues to say, "And the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." And in Matthew 28, verse 20, in the final sentence of St. Matthew's Gospel, when Jesus is instructing his disciples to go out and preach his gospel to all nations, he encourages them and says, "I am with you always until the end of time." Now, at times, this church that Jesus founded meets in what is called councils, the purpose of which is usually to discuss issues relevant at the times. And invariably out of these councils come documents which formalize some of the teachings on those issues. It is important to note that the Church does not make new doctrine at these councils. Instead, it constantly reflects on what has been faithfully handed down through the centuries. Much the same as the US Supreme Court tries to faithfully adhere to the spirit of its constitution that was founded by its founding fathers, and why the British laws place such a heavy emphasis on precedent. Occasionally also the Church produces what is known as a catechism, which is a summary of the main points of doctrine. Now, over the centuries, many such catechisms have been made, and all are valid. None is superseded, and none contradicts another. They are documents, again, that are designed to state or restate the fullness of the tradition in language that is more suited to the time. The most recent catechism was commissioned by Pope St. John Paul II in 1986 and was finalized in 1997 as a sure norm for teaching the faith. In my coming videos, I will attempt to summarize this catechism and present it in a series of short clips. This is really my way of studying the catechism myself, and I offer it to you with no attempt at teaching. There will be no annotation or comment from me. Please feel free to download and use these videos as you see fit, possibly in catechetical programs such as the RCIA. Nothing would please me more. I will stop now and ask you to join me in the study of our rich doctrine, so that our study of Scripture and our discussions of the many moral issues facing us today can be better informed by the authentic teachings of Jesus. Thank you.